Gospel of Mark. He came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when he had stepped out of the boat, immediately a man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him anymore, even with a chain. For he had often been restrained with shackles and chains, but the shackles he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you, by God, do not torment me." For he had said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now there on the hillside, a great herd of swine was feeding. And the unclean spirits begged him, "Send us into the swine, let us enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine. And the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. The swineherds ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus and saw the demonic sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had had the legion, and they were afraid. Those who had seen what had happened to the demoniac and the swine reported it. Then they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed by demons begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus refused and said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. A reading from Psalm 89. I will sing of your steadfast love, O Lord, forever. With my mouth I will proclaim your faithfulness to all generations. I declare that your steadfast love is established forever. Your faithfulness is as firm as the heavens. You said, I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn to my servant David, I will establish your descendants forever and build your throne for all generations. O God, with us, bless my words, bless the reflections and meditations of our hearts and minds. May we eagerly respond to your call. Amen. What happens when a person cannot be restrained and cannot control his own impulses? In the story today, we are faced with this question. In the land of the Gentiles, there existed such a person. Because of his behavior, he is considered to be unclean. He has been driven out of the city as an outcast and lives in the graveyard among the dead. He has been cut off from all that is familiar to him, home, family, friends. He is oppressed and miserable. One commentary described him like an untamed beast left to roam the outskirts of the city. What kind of a life is that? Although the man is originally identified as having an unclean spirit, it is soon evident there is much more going on. There are, in fact, many unclean spirits, so many that his name is Legion, a reference to the Roman army, an army of unclean spirits. His living in the graveyard surrounded by death is a metaphor for the death that he carries within himself. He cannot go on like this. As Jesus gets out of the boat, it is the man who approaches him. But in fact, it is the unclean spirits in the man who recognize Jesus as the Son of the Most High God. Ironically, the ones who torment the man night and day do not want to be tormented by Jesus. They ask to be released into the herd of swine on a nearby hillside. Jesus gives them permission to be released into the herd of swine, with tragic results for the swine and their caretakers. Not surprisingly, the caretakers run off to tell what has happened by the sea. And people from the city and the country throng to see what is really going on out at the graveyard. How could the one who has been out of control for such a long time have been healed? And who is this man that can cast out such foul demons? It sounded impossible, but it is true. There they find the man clothed and sitting quietly with Jesus. The crowd's response may be surprising to us. Rather than being grateful for such healing and celebrating, they are afraid. What causes this fear? Jesus. Because Jesus has a power beyond anything they have seen before. The powers and spirits that were ruling in the man and which no human could subdue had been released, freeing the man from the clutches of oppression, uncleanliness, and death. Such a person must be dangerous if he can do such a thing, especially since he was a Jew in Gentile territory and the two were enemies. They want nothing to do with him. The man's response, on the other hand, is much different. He begs to go with Jesus, but Jesus has other plans for him. He tells him to go home to his friends and family and to proclaim the wonders that God has done, which is what he does. He becomes a disciple who experiences grace and new life. Our story is about power and authority. Who has power? Who is it? How is it exercised? Paul speaks about powers and principalities. In Ephesians 6, verse 12, we read, "Our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." We see this in our world today as well, in the wars being waged with so many innocent lives lost, in the economic injustice which allows 1% of the world's population to control over 50% of the world's resources, in human trafficking, treating humans as animals to be bought and sold, in the climate crisis, and on goes the list. We see it in our own lives. Increases in mental health challenges, especially among our youth. Families that are breaking down. Racism, xenophobia. It's all around us. When our eldest daughter was young, she used to watch a cartoon called Captain Planet. In the show, there were various villains who were all disfigured from the work they did and the materials that they worked with. They were easy to spot. In real life, it is much harder to distinguish the good people from the bad people. In addition, there was a group of 5 young people who each possessed a superpower. They were all average-looking youth. When they put their powers together, they produced a superhero called Captain Planet. Together, they and he would rescue the world from destruction at the hands of one of the villains. Many great works of fiction deal with this theme of the forces of good and evil. Walter Wink, an American theologian, wrote a series of books about the powers that be. And we have talked here about the angel of the Good Shepherd. Spirits and powers that are all around us, calling us into relationships of greed, envy, sloth, gluttony, lust, pride, and wrath, or into relationships of generosity, sharing, purposeful action, enough, love, and peace. In real life, no one is purely good or purely evil. We all share in the human condition of sinfulness, and there is a kernel of good in all of us, even if it is buried under a lifetime of abuse and sinfulness. But we can intentionally try to lean into the positive, life-giving Spirit of God, the one who is able to cast out demons, to give permission to them to come out. The forces of good are more powerful than the forces of evil. We, like the kids in the Captain Planet cartoon, are striving for the forces of good in our world. Together, we will have a greater impact on our community than we do alone. We are being called into a new thing by God. It is unsettling, and all of us respond in different ways. We feel different emotions and long for a future here at the Good Shepherd. I feel confident in the people of the parish and in the Board of Management to be able to discern a way forward. And I am aware that we are cautious. Let us move together in the steps that God lays out for us, companions on a journey. Let us proclaim with the saved man the wonderful things God is doing in our lives.